I have a poem I would like to share, if
Okay.
that's you. So I called it Dear Truth. And it's to so the people, my extended family who doesn't talk to me, and the people that like I grew up with, basically.
Okay.
All right. So it's called Dear Truth. Your words were in my body, they were feeling up my brain, touching it in places I couldn't unfeel or explain. I never asked for them to teach me, I never said it was okay, but on these childhood doubts, you convinced me to pray. To a story that you called the truth, you said it would give me hope. I fell for that so many times, never learned to simply cope. Theocratic acrobatics are no longer welcome in this brain. It's not a stupid playground on which to entertain such fucked up ideologies like all gay people are bad, just a bunch of opinions making a lot of people sad. You're bending over backwards to keep yourself in line. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself just exactly why? Make the truth your own, you say, as if it were a choice, but that implies an optional or just a fucking voice. With the ability to reason, ask questions, and disagree, no, the moment you saw my mind was made, outside you pushed me. So you can keep your double life. I'd rather just live the one. At least here now, I'm finally having fun. Hello, my name is Z. I use they, them pronouns. I'm 27 years old. I was one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and I am shunned.
All right, Z. So how did you come to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place? Were you born in?
Yes, yeah, I was born into it. So third generation on both sides. My grandparents were both reached in the door-to-door ministry. It was my grandmother's. Neither of my grandfathers ever took to it. My mom's mom actually studied against my grandfather's wishes. He was a World War II vet and violently opposed to it. And then my mom, I remember my mom telling me about her going to like a Catholic priest and asking him questions, and him telling her that she's asking too many questions and didn't satisfy her. So she was definitely looking for something at the time. She was baptized at 23. She had a bit of a rough like worldly life before then. She contracted like an STD. She had an abortion. There was all of this personal drama in her background that really, I think she was really searching for something after she had been hurt. And then let's see, my grandma on my dad's side got baptized in 63. She was very devout. She was a very codependent person. I think she kind of made my dad the husband after my grandpa left when he was 16. So he got baptized at 15, came from a very Catholic background as well. And he didn't like any other religions. And he wanted to actually get baptized earlier. And then he would go on to, and they had him wait. And then he would go on to be an elder, and they're both still very devout to this day.
Okay.
And
That's interesting because your mom is following a certain path that a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses follow, that they are vulnerable. They've had some rough times in their worldly life, so they're looking for something better. And oftentimes, like you said, they have questions. It's the same thing with my mom. She had questions, and my uncle was a Baptist minister who had gone to seminary, so that's her brother, and he didn't have a definitive answer to all of her questions. And as we all know, Jehovah's Witnesses have answers. It doesn't mean it's right, but they'll tell you something, even if it's a thought-stopping technique. And so that's where she found that solace. So I can definitely see how your mom would have been drawn to it. And codependency is rife in the organization. So, your poor father.
Yeah. My grandma, I wouldn't be surprised if she secretly thought she was one of the 144,000. Like, she never said it, and it never came up during memorial, but it was definitely, she just put so much into it that I think she kind of expected something. She must have expected something back, just how much she put into it. It was her entire life. I mean, she was letter writing, even in like nursing home, like before she went into hospice and like passed away. So she was like, in it. I think she was disappointed that it didn't come. And I'm surprised that the 73 or 75 when they predicted that the end would come. And I'm surprised that that didn't put off my parents or my dad and my grandma, but apparently it didn't.
Doesn't that show how emotional the whole thing is? It's
Mhm.
and how they've got you really trapped, because otherwise, when they told you 75 was going to be it, and it wasn't, if it was just purely if this was an intellectual exercise, you would say, oh, okay, they're liars, and you would leave. But because they've got you in so many different directions, they've got you twisted up emotionally and mentally, you say, well, I guess it was my fault because I read into what they said, which is what the society said to people, was you all misinterpreted. And so, people get caught up in it. They have a lot to lose. It's kind of a double bind situation, and there's no easy way out. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, so what was the worldview that you were given growing up that way, or what did it mean to you?
So this is interesting. In preparation for this, I read some of like my old diaries because I wanted to see like how I was thinking at the time. I kept a lot of journals because we lived in a small town, and just reading and journaling was a lot of what I did. And I guess I was suicidal at 10. So I thought, I wrote God isn't with me. And so I never really bought into it, I think. I think a lot of it was performative for me, but obviously, I remember when people have asked me about it in the past, I've always said, "Oh yeah, like I thought I believed it," but now looking back at what I was secretly like writing in my journal, clearly my subconscious was like, "This is not it. Like there is no God. What is going on?"
Wow, that's amazing that you have those journals to go back and look at. I think it would be so cool for most of us to have some glimpse into looking back into that. I mean, maybe it would just be sad for a lot of us as well. But just to see, because I'm sure we all had cracks in the foundation that we could start to see somewhere in there at some point, the doubts that you put up on the shelf until the shelf breaks. So when you wrote you said God isn't with me, correct?
Yeah. And then I also wrote, don't kill yourself. You can get through this even if you have to do it alone. And I was 10 years old writing this. So I think something that definitely played into it was I have major depressive disorder. So and it was undiagnosed for years, and I definitely would go through episodes, and my parents wouldn't know what is going on. They just thought I was. My mom always told me I was just a very like unhappy child. I was always angry and frustrated, and like we'll talk about it, but it's like, well, there were reasons that was going on. So maybe if you would have like gotten me some help, we could have worked through this. But of course, they don't believe in mental health professionals at all. So
Yeah,
that was
especially back then. Now they're a little more lax on it, but yeah, back then you didn't go see a psychiatrist or a psychologist or a counselor or whatever very often at all. I just do you know well, and maybe we'll get into in your life what it was that made you feel like God wasn't with you at that time. But I just wondering if there was something like a straw that broke the camel's back at that time that made you feel that way.
not quite yet. There'll be something when I'm a teenager that well, just little things that kind of culminates. But I just remember trying to pray and just thinking that like I would hear a voice or I would hear something very obvious, and that just never happened. And then my dad explained it to me. He's like, well, it's more of a feeling, and I just never really felt anything. So it's like, am I doing this wrong? Like, what is going on? Why can't I feel these things? Yeah, and personal prayer always felt really weird to me. The few times I did pray was when like something bad had happened. Like when I was 7, my dad got cancer, and like then I definitely prayed because like I was desperate. I didn't know if he was going to live or not. So I was like, let's try this. Like this is my last resort. Or like when my dog died when I was a teenager, same thing. Like I was just it was like last resort, but it wasn't like I'm going to go to this place of solace when I'm sad. When
Yeah,
times
I completely understand. I could never connect to God in personal prayer either. Not especially when I was young. There was a slight point in time when I was an adult I felt like I did. But yeah, I never got it. I remember asking my mom, even like as a kid, how am I supposed to connect to something that I can't see, that doesn't talk back to me? And every time I've asked for something, I haven't seen any results. So like, if this is a magic lamp I'm rubbing, like nothing's coming out of it. There's no genie in that bottle. And my mom though was the type of person who could go into like personal prayer for hours by herself. And I could never connect to that at all. Not at all. So I get it.
that's almost meditation. Like they're very against like yoga and meditation, but like that's basically what you're doing.
Of course it is. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I also think that when I was younger, so we'll talk like more about I guess I'll talk a little bit more about my mom. So she came from a very abusive background. I think my grandpa had like PTSD, and just society at the time encouraged people of that gender to be, very, very violent with their spouses. And you just, like I've heard them say, you just didn't talk about it. So I think my mom was coming from a place of abuse, and she definitely projected onto me, like she was concerned that the cycle was going to start again with maybe like me or my sister. So I just remember when I would get angry and lash out or like be sad, I kind of felt crazy. Like I remember thinking a lot of the time, like, am I crazy? Like, am I a violent person? Am I like an abusive person like my grandpa was? So it definitely got in my head, all of those things. And my grandpa on my dad's side was schizophrenic. So that's why he left my dad as a teenager. He kind of had stuff that was undiagnosed until like right before he died. So all of that culminated into me just like not knowing what was what. It was, yeah.
How can you feel stable or secure even within yourself when there's all these messages around you that don't make you feel super secure? As far as mentally, it's going to make you start doubting yourself a lot. And that's so. Let's talk about that a little bit. Then, what was your childhood like at home? What was it like at home growing up?
So I think we were very spoiled. We were definitely upper middle class, which I know everyone kind of says that, but we had like everything we needed. But my dad wasn't, he wasn't like a big businessman by any means. He owned a what's it called? A cleaning business, Blackburn Services in Steamboat. And he, so he kind of just did that during the week. And then my mom was a stay-at-home mom. But we seemed to make good money because from very young, they were taking me like with them cleaning. I guess when I was a baby, my mom would like have me on her back, helping my dad clean like banks and like realtors' offices. We would do like construction cleanups, a lot of that stuff. So it was kind of like, it became, when we got old enough, it became kind of like a family business. But one thing that was really important was we would go to Europe almost like every other year for vacation. They stay every year. They're going somewhere. They love traveling.
That's a sweet vacation for a Jehovah's Witness to go to Europe every other year. Most of us only got to go to the convention.
Well, a couple of them were. Like we went to Austria when I was 16, I believe, and that was an international convention. And I think that now my parents only go to international conventions, I believe. That or they'll make like a trip with like another family, and they'll do witnessing. At least before the pandemic, they were like they were still doing witnessing on their vacation. And that's something too, like we would go on vacation, but we would always try to go to a meeting in Italy. And we met a lot of people like that. We went to Italy and I just talked to my sibling recently, and that was like her favorite memory of us was when we went to Italy and met people that was our age. And even though they were Jehovah's Witnesses, it was kind of like their community. We got to see like how they did things. So we were really spoiled as kids, I think, to be able to do all of that.
Yeah, how'd that make you feel, being able to travel and see Jehovah's Witnesses in different places? We always heard, it's a worldwide organization, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of us never saw much of the world. So getting a chance to go out and travel and see congregations in different places, did that impress you?
Yeah, definitely. I remember thinking that I remember being really conflicted. Like it was true what my parents had said. This is a very united thing that's happening around the world, but it also felt like we're still very separate. Like I still only saw a part of Italy. I saw the Jehovah's Witness part of Italy. I still only saw part of Austria, the convention. So I would always see like graffiti or something super worldly that people would talk about, or especially when we would go to like the big museums that talked about like the great rulers of the time, especially France. Oh my gosh, the Louvre. Just seeing all that gold, and my parents loved the tours. They loved history because they loved these things so that they could go and prove people wrong. They could interject when the tour guide was speaking, be like, actually, the Bible says this. It's like their way of like witnessing.
Oh, yeah, I'd hate to be in that group, during the tour.
My parents always were happy to do that. So it made me see like, well, yes, they do have a big, a big connection around the world. It still feels very separate from everything else. Like we had our own shuttles. When you go to these conventions, you're shuttled together. You're everywhere you go, you're in a bubble with all these people. So you're going to all these places, but you're still in that bubble, that protected bubble. And I just hated that. I wanted to if I wanted to travel somewhere, I wanted to like go with locals and go in the actual like non-touristy places. That's the type of traveling I like. So yeah, we were very spoiled in that way. We actually, I think part of it too was my parents were so my dad's from out here in California, and then my mom was from upstate New York. So they kind of grew up in different places. They kind of met in Colorado, but they stayed in the same small town for like 20 plus years. So I think that was part of it. Like growing up in like a rural place, they wanted to like get out of that, but instead of traveling to other places, we traveled to a few other places in America, but that wasn't their favorite thing to do. They liked like living in a small town, and then you would travel to like these really extravagant places and then come back.
Kind of cool. I kind of I can understand that. Live in one area, and I'm probably cheaper to live rurally as well. Take that money and use it to go see what you want to see in the world. I can kind of understand that. And you mentioned being spoiled, and so okay, if you want to say that, you could say that maybe like you were spoiled as far as materially,
yes,
or experientially in some ways. But it doesn't sound like you were necessarily spoiled mentally and emotionally, in the environment. So what was that like?
My parents still lack that. It's definitely something that that I never saw that like it being that way, especially when I moved out here to Southern California. I saw all these kids getting spoiled. So I thought it was always like other people that this was happening to. Like certainly I'm not being spoiled because I never had like a phone early on or like a nice car. Well, actually I did have, I had an okay car. It wasn't like the hand me down. But I just remember thinking that like I couldn't possibly be spoiled because of the way I was being treated. Yeah. So I don't think I realized the difference between, well, yes, they're giving you what you need. And I see that now, like even the home I'm in now, they've helped co-sign on this place. Like they basically like given me a place to live. But they're nowhere to be found in my life emotionally and mentally.
Yeah, and I mean, let's, a big part of being a good parent is to be there mentally and emotionally for your child. It's not just about providing physically. You're not just a plant to be watered and given sunlight. Heck, you're even supposed to talk to plants, right? You know, you're supposed to have, parents that are there, to validate you emotionally, to, help you mentally, to encourage you to be more of who you are instead of a reflection of them. And those are the things that good parents do, and it's hard to find. And it's not just hard to find inside the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses. That can be hard to find, period. Parents are people too, and they don't always have their own stuff together in order to, parents are still dealing with their own things. We're all just people.
Exactly. I think had my parents gotten like therapy and mental health of their own, they would have been able to give me a lot more. But I think my mom was dealing with a lot of stuff, which to this day I've made peace with that. I don't discredit them for that. I've helped work out through therapy on my own that they don't know how to love me the way I want to be loved, and that's okay. Like they're showing me love the way that I know how. So at least there's that. Like they never beat me as a kid. They never like neglected me. So it's like at least there's that. I'll take what I can. But as far as like the congregation went, we were very popular. We were, because it's such a small town. I guess there was only like 17 publishers when my dad started there in the 80s at some point. So very small town. But yeah, they were very well liked. My dad was an elder as long as I could remember. There was a couple times as a teenager when my sister got disfellowshipped later on that he got taken down, and then I got disfellowshipped, obviously. But he was always like, you would go to meetings back when it was 3 times a week, which I absolutely think is atrocious. We would go, and the only time that you couldn't go is if you had like a fever or you were like uncontrollably coughing or throwing up or something. Like you had to be showing physical signs. You couldn't just say, I'm sick. And I'm sure like people will have listened to E.T. or watched E.T. the movie, where he takes a thermometer and puts it close to the light bulb.
Oh, yeah.
I remember watching that and trying that all the time, and it never worked for me, but because it was always cold by the time my mom came back. But I just remember like trying to show a fever because I did not want to go to Thursday night. Sundays were kind of fun because I could like comment, and it was about more like tangible subjects. But Thursday night with the talks and just like the updates for the week and all that, it was so boring. I hated Thursday night meetings.
That's pretty hard to expect a kid to sit there for 2 hours. The Theocratic Ministry School and the service meeting were very boring. Now they have, I don't know, it's the Christian Life and Ministry meeting or something. It's, I don't know. They're always changing something. So that you have to keep up, so that you stand out like a sore thumb if you don't keep up.
New life.
Yeah, they keep that pressure on you. So yeah, I can understand putting the thermometer by the lamp, trying to warm it up and get out of it. I definitely get that. You did enjoy commenting on Sundays. Did you enjoy like field ministry and stuff too, or did you have friends at the Kingdom Hall?
So I had one friend, her name was Jade, and just to show you how different we are, she's at Bethel now. She runs the last I heard, she runs like the shuttle. She's like a shuttle driver.
Is she went married?
What's that?
Is she married?
Yeah, she's married to who also works out there.
Okay, that's why she's at Bethel. I was just because it's hard for a single female to be at Bethel. That doesn't happen very often unless you're married to a brother. So, yeah. Okay.
Gotcha. Yep. The package deal. Yeah, we actually all her husband is actually more my sister's age. So he was kind of like in that group. My sister's 4 years older. She had a lot more friends in the congregation, but basically it was just me and Jade. Because we're the same, like people perceive us as the same gender. You couldn't hang out with people. I couldn't hang out with any of the boys. Even though there were a couple in the hall. And yeah, I just remember it being basically her. I would like when my dad would do traveling talks, or whatever that was called. He'd be like the traveling brother. So at least I could go to other congregations and meet people. So I would make a couple of friends in other congregations, but it was just hard to meet up because I was so far away. I was like at least a 45-minute drive from any other congregation that had kids my age.
So did you ever make any friends with other congregations that you like at least got to be pen pals with or something back then?
Yeah, when I was older, not until I was probably like a preteen, but before 11, 10, like it was pretty much just me and Jade. Sometimes like my mom would have studies and they would have kids, but everyone was always like coming and going, and people would move into the hall and then they would move out. Like they were just there for a little while. So it wasn't like I had any, like Jade was like, we were like an all encompass friendship too. Like I was like very possessive of her because she was my only best friend. And of course she wanted to have other friends. And I just remember, so I was really attracted to her body too. And I felt a lot of shame for that. And we kind of had like a sexual interaction when we were really, really little, like 5 years old. And I tried to talk to her about it later. And that was probably like the last time I talked to her as a teenager after I moved out here. I was like on the phone. It was before I even got disfellowshipped. And I was just asking her if she remembered that. And she was like, yes, but we're not going to talk about that. And I was like, I'm just making sure I'm remembering this correctly, that I didn't make this up. So we probably stopped being friends. Yeah. When I was a teenager, when I moved out here to California, I think they could tell that I was drifting away or whatever, fading when I was around like 16, 17. And I actually had like planned a trip to go back there and snowboard. And her mom said not to come, and they like wouldn't give me a reason why. So she was like my main friendship. But other than that, there was kind of kids. I tried really hard to latch on to my sister and her friends, but they were so much older that they just saw me as like the little sibling that, you know, they didn't want to hang around. And then there was kids younger than me, but then I saw them as my sister's friends did. I was like, oh, you're the little kid. I don't want to hang around you. So it was like a bit like because those 4 or 5 years when you're that age are a big difference. Like if you're 10, you don't 5-year-old or even a 7-year-old, like you're too young. You want to hang out with like 15-year-olds.
Yeah, absolutely. I was the older brother. So, and my younger brother was like, 4 years younger, and then another 4 years or whatever. And it's like, yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying there. And I also understand, even if you didn't have Jade as just your one kind of peer to have as your friend to latch on to, it's also just kind of the nature of Jehovah's Witnesses that when we would meet other people, a lot of times we would latch on and almost view people as like these instant fast friends, and we knew all these people. But the reality was that for a lot of those cases, we weren't really friends with them. We were just both friends with being one of Jehovah's Witnesses. It was just this identity that we shared. It wasn't that we actually ever got exposed to who the other person really was, or that we knew who we really were, because we were just Jehovah's Witnesses. That's who all of us were. And that's why you could just instantly be fast friends, because it wasn't quite so real.
I remember being really jealous of her family. So her dad was like rough and tough, like cowboy type, and he had snowmobiles. And I mean, he like if he was worldly, he probably would have been like a military guy, because for like their punishment, if they didn't brush their teeth or something, they had to go climb up like a big huge rope, kind of like just like a climbing rope, and they had to go all the way up and touch the top. So they were always just like pushed physically, which I don't know, like that seems a little a little abusive, but
oh yeah, that's not typical.
yeah, I mean, it's not like he was hitting them, but it is like the dropping 15 sort of a thing.
Yeah, I mean, you can punish and hurt kids in different ways. It doesn't have to just be hitting, and that's you didn't brush your teeth, so you have to go climb the rope. That's a bit extreme.
Yeah. But oddly, I was drawn to that because I wanted to prove myself physically. And my dad was the most physical thing my dad has ever done is like skiing. Like he skied back when he was young enough to. But he wasn't a big physical. Like we would go hiking. That was about as physical as my family got. Besides like mountain sports with other families.
And what did you want to do aside from climbing the rope? What did you want to do that you didn't have the opportunity to do?
Um, well, we did snowmobile with them. I was just really jealous of her life. Like they had they moved out to even a more rural place when she was a little older, like probably 10 or 11. And they had like a farm animals, and I loved animals. Like that was my jam back then. I didn't really think about like doing anything when I was an adult. It's not like I wanted to be like a vet or something because I didn't really think of a job. I just loved animals.
Gotcha.
But let's see. I would have loved to have been in sports. I really wanted to like be on the soccer team or something. I just really wanted to play, and I finally did when I was 18. I finally played roller derby.
Oh, cool.
But I was just so like I just wanted to be like have an excuse to be a part of something that wasn't Jehovah's Witnesses. So I really wanted to play sports. My mom will tell you that I didn't, but I specifically remember her asking her one time, "Can I be on soccer?" And she said it was on the soccer team, and she said it was too competitive. And I'm not sure how Jehovah's Witnesses do it in other places, but I just remember that being like a very taboo thing to hear of other Jehovah's Witnesses being on sports teams. That was like,
oh no, that's unnecessary association with the world. You don't. I mean, I not only couldn't be on the team, I couldn't go to the park and play with the kids. I couldn't go across the alley as the kids were playing in the alley right behind our house.
really?
They're playing basketball on a goal on the back of a garage. I wasn't allowed to play with those kids. Could not play basketball like that. I had to get my own. You talked about being in the bubble. I had to get my own goal and play in my own yard. I couldn't play with those kids.
Poor thing.
Yeah, that's how it was. I mean, you weren't allowed. So I totally get that. Well, so then what about you with like at school? Did you have friends there? Did you feel like you fit in there at all?
No, I mean, I've been an introvert playing the extrovert part for most of my life until I finally realized as an adult, like I'm a loner, man. Like like this whole pandemic, I haven't loved it. I don't love that people are dying. I don't love that we have to wear masks every day at work, but it's like not much change for me. Like I like hanging out with one or two people at a time. I'm not a big like group person. It kind of just gives me a lot of anxiety because people perceive me wrong, and it's just where I'm at like right now, and especially just with just the bubbles I was forced into. I was always forced to go with the girls, and it just always felt weird. Like, why just the girls? Why can't everyone hang out? Like, why does it have to be like a segregated gender thing? So I do remember in school, so I homeschooled back and forth. So I was probably kindergarten through fourth public, fifth and sixth homeschooled, seventh public, eighth homeschooled, ninth public, and then the rest homeschooled. So literally like almost every other year it was back and forth. And most of that was my doing. I've heard a lot of people say that they were forced to homeschool, but I honestly wanted to homeschool because it wasn't any fun. Like, why do I want to be around all these kids that I can't hang out with? Why not just get this over with, stay home, and eat ice cream all day? Like I ended up.
Okay, so you did kind of, while maybe you didn't want to be friends, like have massive groups of friends and be the popular person or whatever, you did want to have some friends at school. You did want to connect to other people, even if it was one-on-one, but you knew that wasn't allowed. That's interesting. I've never heard of anybody being in and out of public school like that. That seems like it'd be really hard. But I can totally understand why you would be like, well, look, if I can't be friends with these people anyway, what's the point? If it's just about the school, let's get this done. I get that.
Yeah. And it just gave me time to be like a lot of like introspective time to figure out who I was. Because I think I had a lot of anxiety around my peers without really realizing why. I just knew that, like I said, I was forced into these things. Um, and so school, I liked learning. I liked learning a lot. I especially liked like when we were younger and we had like experiments and things like that. But like I've never been like a book learner, like sit down and memorize these things. I mean, there's very few people that are good at that anyways, but I just loathed it. The only thing I was really good at and still am good at if I practice a little bit more is writing. Like my writing was I always got like A plus on my papers. Like my teacher wanted me to be, when I got to high school, she wanted me to be like in the AP English classes and whatever. So I had strengths, but I just never really thought them through because it wasn't going to come to anything. It's not like I was going to go to college. And let's see, I should say there was, when I got to 7th grade, I had my first worldly friend, which I don't know why my parents kind of like loosened up. I've been always meaning to ask them like what exactly happened. I think at first I lied and said that I was wanting to study with her. Like she's showing interest. Like I used that sort of thing. But I just told her like, hey, this is what we have to do so that I can hang out with you, because I really wanted to hang out with her. She was like, she just had such a different view of the world. It was a very small town, very white, and she was like the only half Black person there. So she just I felt very like protective of her. Like people would try to like play with her hair, and I'd be like, no, Grace doesn't like that. Like I just instantly saw that this person was othered, just like I was being othered, and we like related to each other. So we went to a rock concert when I was like 13. And my parents kind of came along, like not to the actual concert, but they came to the city of Denver with us. But that was an experience. That was the first time I had met like an out queer person. It was her mom's friend, I think, but I think it was like her girlfriend that brought us to the concert. And Grace, my friend, was like very goth, like very early goth, like just decked out. She was like the first person I knew that had gotten like piercings. I think she had like a nose piercing or something. So I just thought she was so cool. I definitely had a crush on her. And I just remember that being a very different experience because it was the first time I had smoked pot. It was the first time I had like seen all these people really up, like, cause you're in a concert really up close. And it was a lot of sensory input. I actually had like my first, not my first panic attack, but my first public panic attack. Ironically at Panic at the Disco. I think that's just,
Of course.
like I remember writing that in email, like I had a panic attack at Panic at the Disco.
Well, first of all, that sounds like a fun concert. Other than the panic attack, yeah, I could definitely see why the sensory overload of like that would have had to have been very overwhelming to suddenly find yourself there.
Coming from just like you're at home alone all the time, and now you're in public school, you meet this person, you go to this thing, and you're like, whoa, like, is this how people act? And I think something happened. I think I was groped or something. So I was like 13, and I'm not sure that's what happened because I don't think my brain let me like process that, but something happened. Like someone grabbed me in some way, maybe on accident, but I was like a cute 13-year-old, probably not on accident. So that definitely like shook me too. And I never talked about it or anything. So that experience, like I had kind of a bad taste for the world, but at the same time, like I was with this friend doing this thing that I'd never done. So even though I had kind of a bad experience, I still wanted more. I was like, I want to, I didn't care that the feeling was bad. I just wanted to feel something because.
Oh, wow. Wanted to feel something. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just homeschooling was like, I was just so bored. Like I didn't do anything. You go to a meeting, you go back. If my parents could squeeze in witnessing in the morning and then go home and homeschool, we would. But yeah, I just remember being like, this is awesome. I don't care if it hurts a little bit. I want more of this, like this, what do you call it? Like fruit that you can't have. What's it called? Forbidden
Oh,
fruit.
forbidden fruit. Yeah, yeah. And just wanting to feel something. I mean, really, is a contrast to just the whole Jehovah's Witness life. That life is so monotonous, and every day is kind of the same. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Apostasy or not.
I have. I really liked it. Yeah.
Yeah, just the gray, dull existence of one of Jehovah's Witnesses contrasted to actually feeling things. You know, and wow, that's a very very strong way of putting that. Just wanting to feel something. So for yourself, then, how did things progress as you went into your teenage years and young adulthood? Did you get baptized somewhere in there? Like, how did this all play out for you?
Yeah. So back up a little bit, and like right before I was a teenager. So I started seeing things differently. So my dad got cancer at 7, like I said. The community kind of like rallied for treatment, money for his treatment. So I saw like, so that was like a good mark in my mind of like, okay, so this is community when you're in need, like they really show up. That was really cool. So I became a publisher at 9, like 2 years later, because I was like, this must be a good thing. And I wanted to be part of something again. So being able to give talks, which of course you can't go out and give a talk, which is what I really wanted to do. You have to be with another sister, quote unquote, on stage. So that part I didn't like. It's like, why do I need something here? I can go up and talk, and like I'm a great public speaker. Like I love doing that stuff, but I just thought that was weird. Like I felt like held back. Like, why do I need to be talking to someone? But I didn't really bring that up to my parents. I just kind of,
It's essentially another way of othering you, right? I mean, making you feel different again.
yeah. Well, because I knew like it didn't fit. Like it wasn't matching up. That's where like my gender identity came into it. It's like, this isn't right. Why are you putting me over here with these people? I'm not one of them. But of course I didn't have the words for that yet. And then let's see, my sister got disfellowshipped when I was 10. She was 14. I still to this day don't really know why. I have the theory based on reactions to things that have happened to me, that she was involved in something sexual that was against her will, but she was still disfellowshipped for it when she was 14. Having to do with worldly kids. Something happened. I just remember, I just overheard a conversation when I was younger, hearing my sister talk about it, and the words she was using seemed very like, this was not what this was not initiated by my sister. So that was sort of.
So your sister was disfellowshipped. She was 14, so then that means you were 10, right?
Yeah.
What's that like at 10 when your sister's disfellowshipped? That's got to be mind blowing.
This is terrible, but I kind of liked it because she was finally mine. Like she couldn't talk to her friends. So she finally had to pay attention to me because I've always acted like the bigger sibling. Like I've always been the one. My mom said when I was little, she has this video of like me just bossing my sister around in the pool. Like just get over here now. Like I always acted like the older kid because my sister's more the submissive feminine type, and I'm just not. I'm just very like, if I want something, I say it, and I'm bold about it. And so that was sort of the dynamic. So I was kind of happy. I remember thinking that we could finally be close, and we were, because she couldn't talk to her friends for that whole year. But then the whole this is a community kind of changed in my mind because people started having a lot of disagreements about how to deal with that, because I think it was like one of the first disfellowshippings of someone that age in our congregation. So we went on a trip to France, and we went with a family, and I think people were mad about that because they thought that was technically like she should have been left home with someone. They thought that was like, what's it called? Not enabling her, but yeah, I guess I'll just use that, like enabling her, like giving her time with the family, and like she was rewarded. That's where she was being rewarded, so they didn't like that. And I just remember overhearing conversations where people would be like, "Why are you taking Sierra?" And me just being like, "She's 14. What are we supposed to do with her?" And we always go on trips with our parents. Like, why would we be left home? So that was kind of like stuck with me. I was like,
Yeah, that's
this,
pretty messed up. She's 14 years old. She can't go on the trip. What are you gonna do? Leave her in the streets? I mean, like, what the heck? She's a kid.
yeah, and just the circumstances around her being disfellowship, it's like I don't think any of it was fair to her, and I still think to this day she internalizes a lot of that. Like, oh, it was my fault. Everything is my fault. I deserved it. And it's like, no, sis, I really don't think you did. You were a child.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that changed for me. And then a lot started happening with me sexually before then. So something I wanted to mention, even though it's super personal, I don't really mind talking about it. My mom caught me masturbating at like 3. So from 3 to like, there was one time when I was like 7, and then again when I was like 11, my mom would catch me masturbating, and she would have like sit me down, tell me like have me write out like why this is bad, and I would lie about it and say that's not what I was doing. But there were several times she literally like caught me in the act. And I just remember thinking like, this isn't a bad, like I always knew it wasn't a bad thing that I was doing. I was like, this isn't, I would lie and cry because I was embarrassed, obviously. But I just remember growing up with like knowing that this shame was a bad thing. Like I felt it and I experienced it, but I always knew in the back of my mind, I'm like, this is a bad thing. And then when my sister got disfellowshipped, it just kind of solidified for me. I'm like, I don't think I agree with how they view this thing. I don't know what I think about this thing that you do with other people or you do with yourself, but I just like, there's something there, and I didn't know what it was. And obviously it was my queerness, but I just knew like I did not agree with how they were handling situations.
Yeah, I mean, what a victimless crime. You masturbated. Who are you hurting? And, it is interesting. A lot of people don't realize that even really young kids or babies masturbate.
Yeah,
It
I was
feels good and they do it, right? I mean, like that's just how humans work. It's a biological function. And yet there's all this moralizing of it and all this shame, shaming you about your body and what you do with it from a young age as Jehovah's Witnesses. And not just Jehovah's Witnesses, lots of people do it. But.
Yeah, a lot of people do it. It was so gross when because I think my mom, she tried to tell me, so they really warned me about pedophiles, which, they didn't call it that when I was young. But I remember a very early memory of my parents telling me, like, put up my hand and say, stop, like I will tell on you or something like that, which is super ironic because they took me to visit a pedophile in prison. He was someone who had grown up, or not grown up, but he had been a Jehovah's Witness. His wife was a non-believer, quote unquote. They were getting a divorce, I think, because of him becoming a Jehovah's Witness. So according to my parents, she lied and said that he had molested their kid, and she like groomed the child to believe that. But then he was convicted, like in court, there was enough, people believed what the child had said. And of course, according to my parents, they thought the girl was molested by someone, but not him, because it couldn't be him.
Well, no, he was one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and we all know no Jehovah's Witness would ever do that.
Yeah, how would you? But I just remember going to the prison, and I think one time I went in and visited, and I just remember like getting all these really weird looks. And now I understand it. Like, you're literally bringing a child to visit a pedophile in prison, or someone who's been accused of being a pedophile, and convicted. That was just so strange when I learned about it when I was older, because I always was on their side. I was like, oh, well, he was framed. And now I see it as an adult. And I'm like, but he was literally convicted. So chances are pretty good that he did it. But I just think that's interesting that they taught me all these bad things, like sex is bad, but then let's go visit this pedophile in prison. It's like, oh God.
Yeah, that's really messed up when you think about it. We had a
When he,
pedophile that had been convicted and that came into our congregation at one point, and I will say that the elders did warn family heads to, basically keep their kids away.
yeah.
And that, someone was supposed to watch him and stuff, but he still went out in service. I mean, who cares about worldly kids, right? So let's just take them to, people's doors, and let's just let him out and do what, and people still, because like your parents, he was one of Jehovah's Witnesses, right? So like, well, he's okay. I mean, the Holy Spirit will prevent anything bad from happening. It's a real twisted, warped way of seeing the world.
Well, and even now, like I think me and my dad talked about it once, because he brought something up about like some special that someone tried to talk about, talk to him about, and he was like, how it's not true. And I was like, well, Dad, like there are pedophiles that exist, like not only in the world, but in all organizations, especially in religious ones. And he's like, oh, that's not true. We have one in our congregation. I'm like, you just proved my point, Dad. You literally just, and he's like, well, we are careful with him out in service, and like, oh no. And I'm like, Dad, you're literally proving my point by saying what you're saying. So not only do you know someone, but he's an active member. And I'm not sure if it was the same person, because he got out of prison a few years ago, and I think he joined my parents because he's very close to my parents, and it's just like, this is so creepy. This is so creepy. Like how are you like, this is okay, and then you like victim blame people who have actually been raped, which we'll get into later. It's just like, it's all very twisted, and it's very sad because the things being said sometimes by my parents, I can tell are not my parents. Like that's not really who they are at all. If you took this away, that's not who they are. But because this is influencing them, this is what's coming out of their mouth. And it's just so weird sometimes. Like, I'm not even talking to my parent right now. So I have to remember, I'm like, this isn't you. You're extremely brainwashed.
Yeah, and you can see it through, their lack of ability to see that these things can go on inside their own organization, and that anytime there's an accusation of that, well, that person's making it up, especially if they're worldly, right? Then it's just Satan trying to get them. There's just such a persecution complex, a grandiosity, but it's typical. It's very typical, unfortunately.
Okay, so let's see. Continuing with my teenage years. So we moved to California when I was 14. So that was definitely like a pivotal point for me. I went from homeschooling in Colorado to a public school out here. So that was kind of a big shocker. And I was going through puberty too. So I was having a lot of like body dysphoria, which is basically a word for just the stress that you go through in your life, the daily discomfort of being in your body, like with certain body parts, or just how you are being forced to present, and just the disconnect between like your mind and your body, and just the casual trans experience. So that was a lot. I remember having some lunches just with like the lunch aides, like behind, like in the office. Like I wasn't even having lunch out at recess. It was just a very awkward time for me. And then when I did get the guts to kind of like venture out, I had like a boyfriend for like a weekend. It was weird. He like asked me out, and I was like, sure. But he had like no way of contacting me. Like we couldn't hang out. Like I didn't have a phone yet. Like other people were starting to. And so it was just like very weird. So I remember having to go up to him and be like, so like, are we done? And he's like, yeah. Like, it was just like weird. It's just a weird like, it wasn't like I actually had a boyfriend. It was just this weird thing that happened. So I started getting interested in a Jehovah's Witness boy because I really wanted to have sex. I had decided that I was just going to do it. But I got baptized. So this is where I was like flip-flopping. Like I had decided this thing, but at the same time we had just moved out here and I wanted to make, like, we had just come around. This is where all my mom's family is. So she grew up from a family of 9 kids. So 2 or 3 of them are out here and they have kids. So cousins and aunts and uncles and my grandma, the whole deal, they're all out here. So I was just really excited. I wanted to like have more responsibilities and make everyone happy now that we had just moved out here like a year before. So I decided to get baptized when I was 15. And I remember my mom telling me like just wait a little while. Like she didn't think I was ready because I was having answering some of the questions because I would do this with school too. I just didn't study. Like I would just kind of wing it. Like it was kind of an adrenaline rush for me to just kind of like come up with shit. And like in school, I was pretty good at it. I kind of knew what they were looking for. I was a smart kid. I was like, okay, these are the answers. Just make something up. Let's just write a little essay and get away with it. But I remember answering some of the questions and he had to like, the brother had to like reword them for me. He's like, do you mean this? And I was like, yeah, that's what I meant. That's what Jesus did. And like, I didn't know what I was talking about. It was all
That's kind of hilarious, like, because it's the difference in like at school, you can kind of make up answers because things make sense. But you know, when the Jehovah's Witnesses are going after the questions for baptism, like it's this whole made up story, and so you have to like, how are you going to come up with that out of the blue because it doesn't always make sense. And so you were kind of like letting him lead the witness, so to speak, and like lead you to the answer. That's kind of funny to see you doing that as a kid.
Yep. Yeah. I know. And my mom doesn't ever let me live that down. She was like, I told you to wait. And it's true. If I had waited like a year or two, there's no way in hell I would have gotten baptized, not fellowship baptized. No way. But I did because again, I wanted to feel something. I thought that I would come out of the water like a different person and I would feel something. But I literally remember during the questions when you stand up and in front of everyone, this huge auditorium of people and answer the questions, you know, I felt like I was getting married. Like, do you take this to be the thing you're going to do? Yes. Like, do you
to be your lawfully wedded cult?
Yeah. Yes. And I remember on the last question, I didn't say anything. I didn't say yes. And I don't know. And I didn't know why. I was like, why? I think I was like, oh, just my nerves got to me or something. But no, I think it was literally my subconscious being like, what the fuck are you doing? Like,
yeah, because isn't the last question like, do you agree to like be part of God's one and only spirit directed organization? Like it's something, it's more like you're supposed to get baptized in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And so the last question is really you're pledging allegiance to the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses. That's what it is. And I've actually got a friend who realized that was kind of messed up, and he didn't say anything when he got baptized either. So I think if you really look at that question, the way it's worded today, you see that it's not the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. It's the Father, the Son, and Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of New York. Yeah, TM.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, so I auxiliary pioneered for a year after that. So I just kind of ignored that. I was like, it's fine. My cousin was like the only person that like squeaked his way up to see me get baptized. We had been pen pals when I lived in Colorado and here. And I always kind of knew we had something in common. I was like, this, he's like, you know, my brother from another mother. And we'll get into later, like how that played out. Like we were much closer than I realized, but I I kind of just remember, just swallowing that feeling. And then after that, I went full speed into it. I auxiliary pioneered for like a year. And I was like, maybe a regular pioneer, but that really changed it for me. Just doing early morning service. I just remember my dad being so happy, and it still makes me like emotional to think about it sometimes, because that was the one time when my dad was truly proud of me. Like and for some reason, like I like making my mom proud, but there's something about making my dad proud that's just very affirming for me. And I remember we would go out like early morning witnessing, and I just remember I wasn't getting much feedback. Like I wasn't getting anyone who's like really interested. In fact, I was getting like a lot of looks like, oh, you poor thing. Like, why are you out here at 6 a.m. while we're on a road trip and you're stopping us like while we're looking at the sunset, trying to tell me about like the Bible. And you look real uncomfortable in that dress. like I was always just really perplexed. Like, why isn't this going as great as I thought it was going to? Like, I'm supposed to have Jehovah's Spirit. I got baptized. I did the right thing. I did all the things, or at least like the big thing that I was supposed to. And I just still felt nothing. So a year after that, I just made the decision deep down. I was like, holy shit, like, how do I get out of this? This is just like the lack of feeling that I had towards any entity was definitely part of it. And then just several, like me talking to my friends about it and then them giving me pushback, like don't question, or like they couldn't give me answers, or they just didn't relate to how I feel. I just started feeling really alone because I had made friends out here, but I'd only known them for like a year. So we weren't like that great of friends. And they were just very feminine and just very into things that I wasn't interested in. And they wanted husbands, and I just like didn't care about getting married. That was like never a goal of mine. So I thought for a minute, I was like, maybe I'll like just be a missionary, just like go out on my own. Like that sounded cool. I'm like, I'll travel, I'll be on my own. I won't have to get married. Like this will be awesome. But I kind of knew deep down, I'm like, I can't keep going out in service. So how am I going to be a missionary if I can't even go out in service? And so around 16, I just stopped believing. I was like, okay, God isn't real. So how am I going to get out of this without losing my entire family?
That's tough at 16. If you be on like the ex-Jehovah's Witness Reddit or other ex-Jehovah's Witness groups or forums, and sometimes you'll see kids come on there and they know it's not the truth. And it's the toughest position for a child, a 16-year-old child, to still to know that you're kind of stuck in this situation. And it's such a huge thing too, especially once you've committed and done the whole baptism thing. That's where it can get really real. And so how was that for you? How did you deal with it?
So I just started kind of living a double life. I had my own car at this point. I had met this guy who was interested in me in my congregation, and he was very into me. Like he wanted to get married. He gave me like a promise ring at one point, but he had very strict parents. He came from, I think his dad came from the Philippines, and they were very strict with him. Even more so than my parents. I thought my parents were strict, and then just hearing about his experiences, like they controlled like how like the miles he drove on his car they watched, and like he could only be out for a certain amount of time. It was all very weird. But I started sneaking around with him. I would pick him up from his school, pretending I was very good at pretending to be an adult. So I also started smoking cigarettes around this time. And I mean, I would go to the gas station. I would dress up like I was like a server, like the whole get up, like an apron, slacks, like a nice shirt. And then I would like mess up my hair and go in and buy like an energy drink, a sports bar, or like whatever, an energy bar, and then a pack of cigarettes. And just every time the people would be like, oh, rough day at work. And I'd be like, yeah, like I was just like, I just knew how to like work this adult system when I was a teenager. So I did that. I would go to his school and because I was still homeschooled at this point. And I actually started nannying too for the Jehovah's Witness couple next door to my parents. So I just felt very adult. Like I was taking care of this kid so much so that he felt like mine. Like I would watch him for like 8 hours a day sometimes. And I would be smoking cigarettes on the side. So I was just completely living this double life. And then he and I ended up getting intimate, definitely with me being like the aggressor. I think he definitely felt bad for it. So we got approved, or I don't think anything happened to him. He wasn't baptized. Yeah. So I got approved at 17.
Was it public or proof or private?
Yeah. Public. It was really embarrassing. Yeah. So people cut. So at that point, I think that kind of tipped it too. Like people kind of knew to be wary of me. And even then there was one, family. She was a single mom and she had 2 girls that were twins that were my age that I hung out with all the time, Midnight and Lexi. And I just remember being, and this dates it a little bit, in a Blockbuster parking lot in my new car on the phone with like their mom had called me, and she was like saying all these things to me like about Jehovah. And I just like wasn't really understanding like what was she trying to say. And by the end of the conversation, by the time we hung up, I was like, it like hit me. I'm like, oh, you're telling me that I can't hang out with your kids anymore. Like I didn't really understand. It was just I was just in such shock that it was happening that it took me until after we were off the phone to realize what she had just said. And I just remember it was like one of the rainiest seasons in Southern California, just like crying in my car. Like, I'm really doing this. Like, this is, I'm not going to turn back. I'm not going to let these people scare me. Like, if I want to leave, this is my personal journey. Why are you telling me what to do with my life? And why are you trying to control your kids like this? Like, this is not healthy. So I just went even further after that. I started taking like an auto mechanic class, and I got a boyfriend because I was just desperate for attention, honestly, from anyone. And my parents were surprisingly okay with him. Like they knew about him. They ended up finding about him somehow. I'm not sure if I tried to hide him or not. But they like they didn't forbid me from seeing him. And then when I graduated, he was at my graduation. We had a graduation party for me at 18 and he was there. So it was very like, I don't know if I think they were trying to like convert him. I think they were trying to like, if they're like, oh, well, he likes them, so we might as well try to bring him in. I think that was their thinking. It must have been. There was no other reason they would be okay with me dating a worldly boy.
Yeah, so I was trying to figure out how that worked too, because that's not typical that they would be okay. But sometimes, maybe they thought that you were going down a bad path and they knew they couldn't stop you. So if they could convert him, then it's a package deal, right? And maybe you would come back too.
Well, because they knew my personality. They knew that if they pushed, I would just go even further. Because there have been several times, like once at 16, when I was having doubts, when I was seeing this kid, I started hanging out with this family that was like on the fence. Like they were watching R-rated movies, and like they kind of had like a Christmas gathering, and there was just things where I would like, it wasn't said, but it was just very like, yeah, we don't believe this sort of a deal. But their grandma was really into it, and they had friends, so it was kind of like they were like these double life family. So I was really good friends with the daughter, and I decided that I was going to run away when I was 16. And that was a really pivotal time too, that morning. It was like 6 a.m. in the morning or something. My dad's a very light sleeper, so he heard me take off. And he literally like in his robe, like got in front of the car as my friend was like taking off with me in it, and like came around the side and like opened it up and like yelled at me like to get out of the car. He's like, you are under 18, you are my child, like get inside. I just remember it just being very dramatic. And she was just like caught in the middle of this. She was like 18, I think. She was like, she's gonna, or at the time, she's gonna come stay with us. And I was like, I just didn't understand why I couldn't go. So I started looking into like emancipating myself. Like I was just done. Like I was like, I'm getting out of here. This is not healthy. And I'm just very independent too. I'm like, I can make it. I can go live on my own. I had no plan. Like I was a nanny. I didn't have like a solid job that I could.
And you were a nanny for Jehovah's Witnesses who might cut you in a heartbeat for not, being a good Jehovah's Witness. So there goes your work too.
Yeah, and my mom threatened several times to tell them things. Like when I would be bad, she threatened my job. It was like very controlling. But so my dad talked me back into the house that morning, but that's the one time. And I thought this is my memory when I took an acting class once and they said, think of like your saddest memory. And this was the memory I thought of. Cause he just brought me inside and we were fighting. And then at just one point, he just sits down next to me in his robe and he just like leans onto me. And my dad's not a super like swallow your emotions, like be super macho type of person. But there's very few times that I have seen him cry. And this was one time when he just collapsed onto me and he just asked me over and over. He's like, what did I do wrong? Like, what am I doing wrong here? I don't know if he was talking to me or himself or Jehovah or what, but he was like, so after that, I felt so bad. I was like, I made my dad cry. Like, this is terrible. Like, and then I started feeling like I was crazy again. So I kind of calmed down after that. I was like, okay, like, I'll just do this really down low. Like, I'll just pretend that I'm doing this thing, make my parents happy. But in the back of my mind, I refuse to keep doing this. So at that point, I stopped going out in service and everything.
Doesn't that kind of show though, the what did I do wrong? Like children are this object, this like model that you're building. And it's like, did I miss a piece?
Yeah.
I forget to glue something in. Like children aren't property or objects that you can just control. They're individuals that you get to know as their parents, and that you get to then encourage them to be more of themselves, not that you get to be like, well, they didn't go down the one path that I have determined since the time they were born that they must go down. Therefore, I've done something wrong. Like, maybe that's just not who they are, and you could love them anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But that's just Jehovah's Witnesses often treat children like property to be controlled, not human beings to see and to encourage and to have real relationships with. And it is a sad moment. It's sad in that moment for a lot of reasons, really.
Yeah, you're right. My mom still does that. She has this weird connection to my hair. Anytime I do something with my hair, like one time I shaved the sides of it and she was just like they came back from a trip and they saw me at work because my the Trader Joe's that I work at is very close to where they live, and she just like wouldn't even come up to me. She just from afar, she was like, you look like a dyke. Like that's like the only thing she said. And I was like, Mom, like I didn't even say anything in that moment, but I was crying on the phone to her the next day. I was like, first of all, don't ever call me that. Like that is super, like, that's like a horrible word to call someone. And on top of that, like, this is not your hair. like, why are you so personally offended by what I do with my body? Same thing when I got my tattoos, which I do regret looking back, not waiting until I was out of the house to get those, because that was just unnecessary drama that I could have avoided. They'll be there forever. I could have waited. But I was just so excited that legally someone would do something for me, like to my body that I wanted. My parents couldn't stop them. But yeah, and I think that's why I always like colored my hair when I was younger. This is like the first time I've had colored hair in like a couple of years now. I kind of just like was finally like not doing it for my mother anymore, or like against my mother anymore. I was just like, now I'm just going to do it because I want it. But yeah, for the longest time, it was like I needed to have long hair. And if I didn't, something was wrong. And it was just this ownership. Like this body was hers. And I'm like, this body stopped being yours when I came out of you. Like, it's, yes, we were one person at one time, technically, but like now that I am outside of your body, we are not the same person anymore. We are different people. And
I can't, I'm not saying I don't know your parents. I'm not saying that they are definitely narcissist or something. What I'm saying is that the organization is very narcissistic, and the organization, a narcissist can only see you as a reflection of themselves. They need to control you and how you present to the world because they're afraid it reflects on them. And ultimately, that's what they care about more than anything. That's why Jehovah's Witnesses, it's all about appearances, and they need you to reflect a certain way so that they keep Jehovah's name above reproach or whatever, which just means they look a certain way. And that's what they really care about more than the substance. They care about the looks. And, it's sad. You could be the most devout Jehovah's Witness in the world, but if you colored your hair a bright color and cut it short, well, we can't allow you to give a talk or, like preach the word door to door or whatever. It's all about appearances.
It really is. Even beards. Okay, so I found some paperwork when I was at my parents' house, and I wasn't like meaning to go through their stuff. I was actually doing research a couple of years ago for like me and my coworker were going to make like a documentary style short or something. We wanted to put out something to make people aware of this organization, to like warn them. So I was just like doing a lot of research, and I ended up finding some paperwork from the Watchtower organization to my father in the mid 80s. So like right before my sister was born, a few years before my sister was born. So he had married my mom, but yeah, before my his eldest kid was born. And it was him resigning as a ministerial servant and a pioneer after being a regular pioneer for 10 years because they wouldn't let him have a beard. He wanted to have a beard. And I love this so much. I took a picture of it and like, I want to hang it up because like, that's who my dad is. That rebellious spirit who wanted to have a beard. That's him. And even to this day, when I talked to my parents a little while ago, we had a very dramatic conversation about, because I came out to them as being non-binary. Which long story short, I didn't mean to. I was very emotional after going to a Black Lives Matter protest and just emotions got the better of me. But so we were talking about it and my dad like showed a picture of when they went on vacation of him, like when he had let his facial hair grow out and he was just like, he didn't say anything. He just kind of like showed it to me silently, but just the look on his face, he turned into a little boy again. I'm like, Dad, look at, and I looked at my mom. I was like, do you see his smile right now? Like, this is who he wants to be. This is something that makes him happy, how he presents. This is what I'm talking about. Like when people want to present the way they want to present, because they couldn't get that in their head. They're like, what do you mean present a certain way? I'm like, look, Dad wants a beard. This is exactly what I'm talking about. I want short hair. It's just preference. It's just who you are inside. It's a reflection of it. But anyways, the article was really interesting that I found. My dad literally said, I don't agree. And I'm going to like let my responsibilities go because of this matter. And it was like signed. The original letter that he sent was signed him and another brother. And then I think the other brother gave in, but then he was the one that stood his ground and said like, no. So like years and years and years ago, my dad had a mind of his own at one point. So that just made me really happy to see. But it made also.
Yeah, Z's dad. That's awesome. I love that. I call this my freedom beard.
Yeah.
Because, and you see that usually when any particularly male Jehovah's Witness leaves, they start growing a beard because it's the first time in your life, and most of us on vacation or whatever, we let it grow a little bit. It's such a stupid thing that you cannot have certain facial hair in the organization.
Well, and he made a very good point. So he quoted a scripture that said, what did it say? Something about not to stumble. I can't remember exactly, but something about not to stumble. But as long as it doesn't bring reproach. And because what they were arguing over was, does this is this fit for the area? And my dad was making the point, well, we live in a mountain community and a lot of people have beards here. So it makes me more approachable if I come to their door and I have a beard. I don't look so city-like. So he had like a very good point there. And then as a scripture they used back at him was, just be careful that, it doesn't stumble other people. I wish I could remember the wording. Let me think about it for a second. Basically, as long as other people are okay with it in the congregation. So my dad was like, back at then, he was like, so is it okay if everyone has a beard then? So he was basically trying to get like people to rally behind him and be like, okay, let's all have beards then, because then it's appropriate for the location. And it's just like, he was actually using his brain. Like, oh, it just frustrates.
I can just picture suddenly this small town congregation has like this influx of all these families and all these brothers with beards.
Because this used to be an issue. When I was doing my research back when, I can't remember if it was Rutherford, one of the founders, Rutherford or...
Rutherford hated beards because Russell had a beard and Russell's followers had a beard.
Yeah. And there's old pictures where they're Jehovah's Witnesses and they all have beards. Like,
yeah, of course.
Oh my gosh. I just found that really funny. I was like, I see you, Dad. You're in there somewhere.
Yeah, find the verse of the Bible that says thou shalt not have a beard.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where is that anywhere? You know, I mean, and you could do that with a lot of things, which just shows how much they go above and beyond scripture in lots of matters.
Well, because they say, they kind of do what the place that I work at does. So Trader Joe's has policies, but then they leave it up to their captains to enforce certain. So if you can wear something, because I tried to wear like leggings underneath shorts one time to work because I'd seen a person at another store do it. And it was just more comfortable because I just don't really like showing a lot of my legs. So I was like, I'll just wear leggings underneath. And my captain said, like, no, I just don't allow leggings. And so I was like, okay, like that makes sense. Like, that's the same thing. Like, they're allowed to do that. But when it's, businesses are different. This isn't a business. This is supposed
to. It is.
Yeah, exactly. This is well, I thought this is supposed to be just a faith. Like, everything's the same. But no, you're right. It's run as a business.
Watchtower Bible and Tract Society Incorporated or corporation. It's a corporation. That's all it is.
It is. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I guess let's move on. Oh yeah, so I guess we stopped it when I was 17 or 18. I stopped going out and surf. And then I got my first tattoo at 18, and that was like a big deal because it's like I mean, people who are listening can't see, but it's literally like my whole shoulder. It's up and they're flowers. So it goes like up my arm, on my shoulder, and like down a little bit onto my chest. So it was a huge like 6-hour piece. Like, I went headfirst into this. So it was impossible to hide from my mom. I would wear like long shirts and stuff in the middle of the summer, and she was like, what's going on? So they found out about it. I thought it was just really funny, the difference in their reactions. So I was house sitting we used to live right next door to them, my aunt and uncle's house. And my mom was like, you're staying there for the night. Like, I can't even. Like, if it was up to me, you would be kicked out of this house. And my dad just looked at me. He was like, well, at least they're flowers. Like, at least you didn't get a skull and crossbones. Which is just like crazy. He's the elder. He's supposed to be the one like freaking out. But he's just such a mellow guy. He's like, like, you know, it's your choice. It's your body. But, you know, Jehovah doesn't like that. You know, like the whole spiel. But he wasn't like, you're my child, I'm going to discipline you. He just could kind of see like I was going my own path and there's nothing he could do about it. I think it just made him sad more than anything. Yeah. Which, like I said, I wish I would have waited. But that was definitely, I don't know how I didn't get disfellowship for that, because other people saw. Like, I wasn't going out in service anymore, but I would go to meetings and I would always say things that I disagreed with, though. And I would always upset my mom. I remember saying things and my mom would like head to the back, like all upset because just, it didn't make sense. And I would just point out, like, underneath my breath, like, sure, like, okay, just these like little comments that my mom hated.
I'm not really sure that you can. I'm not sure you can technically get this fellowship. I mean, you can technically get this fellowship for anything three men in a room decide, but I think tattoos are one of those things. I mean, I've known a number of people who've had them.
Yeah.
You can get reproved, maybe. They might strip you of privileges or not let you do certain things, but I don't think that it is a gross sin that you can get disfellowship for. I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong.
I mean, especially out here, like we said, like circumstantial, obviously out here. I didn't know anyone who had them except for like, there was a guy who was on my judicial committee later that had some, but from his time in the Navy,
Yeah, I've known that, but I've also known people to get some afterward, and they're still witnesses.
Yeah, that's crazy to me. I feel like that would be because they're permanent. So it's and I remember working at Starbucks, and a bunch of people came in one time, and I think it was right before I got disfellowshipped. And there was this. Oh, and I had gotten them, and I had to like cover them up, but so a bunch of sisters came in, and then as they were walking away, one of them she had like big bandage or like band-aids all over like her legs and her arms and stuff, and it's like, why is like, was she hurt a lot? And then I looked, and it was like, oh, like I saw one peeking out, so she was going out in the ministry and she was covering up all her tattoos, and it almost made it like more obvious like that.
Yeah, that's super awkward.
You're gonna ask like, if you're like getting beat at home, you're okay. Yeah, it was strange. So that's what was going on. I went to, and then my best friend got married back in Colorado, and I just remember going back to Colorado, and I have one on my forearm, and my friend's dad who was getting married like pulled my arm, and that's something that like my mom does that too. Like, let me see, like physically. I really just don't like people physically like pushing me around. Like, don't touch me if I don't approve it. And he like pulled my arm. He's like, let me see like your tattoo. And he's like inspecting it. I'm like, dude, clearly you don't approve of it. Like, why are you trying to like shame me right now in front of everyone at your like after your daughter's wedding? Like, what are you doing? I tried to wear something to cover it up too. He like looked at it. It's like, it just felt so like violating. Like, this is no one's body but my own. Leave me alone. So just the reaction to everything I was doing just pushed me further and further away. I was like, I don't want to be part of this. I want to be able to do whatever I want with my body because it's my body. And then one of my most favorite things that happened was I traveled to Wales. I went to Wales on my own. So my sister had gotten married to a brother from out there. And so I went to see his whole family. He's got a pretty big family out there with like kids and just all different ages of people. And that was a cool experience because it was like my first trip where I was going somewhere, at least internationally. I had traveled to different states alone to visit family, but never internationally. So I wrote a lot in my diaries about that. I was like, this is so cool. Like, this is what I always want to do. That was like my dream, was to be like, like Jason Bourne. Like, I wanted to just be traveling on my own, like on the go all the time, like never knowing where you're going to go next. But I think people started realizing, so they wanted me to go out and service there. And I was like, I would go, but then just every door, it's like, oh, why don't you take it? No, why don't you take it? I'm just really nervous. I don't want them to hear my accent. I would just make like all these excuses. But I think people could see that like I really wasn't in this. And I went to like London for the day by myself, and I visited some other people that lived closer. So that was Wales. So I went to London and Brighton in England. So I had a great time. That was like my favorite trip because I was on my own. I was like living my independent life. But something happened there. So I started talking to one of the guys that was my age, and we emailed, and we kept emailing after I came back. And then I finally let him know, like, I don't believe this. And the last thing he emailed me was, they call it the truth for a reason. And I was like, that just did not make any sense to me. Literally at the screen, I was like, yeah, to brainwash you. Like, I didn't even like think of calling it a cult or anything at the time, but I was just like, that's not a reason. That's so stupid. Like, I did not get that reasoning at all.
No, but that's a convenient thought stopper. It's the truth, though, right? And so you don't have to question it. You don't have to think any farther. You can just say, "But it's the truth," and I just love, you could see even then though that was specifically chosen because if this is the truth, by default, everything else is false, and it shuts people down. It shuts your line of reasoning down, so that you further indoctrinate. I mean, it is brainwashing, calling it the truth. That's why they do that.
Yeah, like when I first came out of it and I would tell people about it, I would forget that people don't know the jargon. I would say, oh, well, she wasn't in the truth. And they're like, what does that mean? And then I just heard myself for the first time. I'm like, it's just these statements that sound that like of course that's what you call it, but then you step back and see it from the outside and it's like, that's such a weird thing to say. And of course it sounds terrible. I left the truth. So you must be a bad person if you left the truth.
Yep.
Because it's not like I left the organization or I left the Jehovah's Witnesses. You don't even say that. That sounds weird. I didn't leave the Jehovah's Witnesses. I left the truth, is the way I, like, when I first came out of it, that's how I was talking. And my friends just pointed out, like, these things you're saying aren't normal. Like, this is jargon. I remember my friend telling me once, like, defining what jargon was. And I was like, oh, so it's like this weird verbiage that organizations use. Sometimes just as like a lot of nonprofits do it. Like Planned Parenthood has a lot of like jargon. Like, I've gone to their seminars and they tell you to put up the jargon giraffe. Like, if you don't know what they're saying, and they kind of forget that there's people outside of the organization that don't know what they're talking about, just let them know and they'll explain what they're saying. I have to do that with a lot of like trans words too. It's like, oh, okay, I have to explain what I mean by that. So it makes sense, but like, that shouldn't be, again, those are like businesses and like ways of thinking. It shouldn't be that like a religion has jargon. It should just be very simple. The Bible, you and God. Like, that's what spirituality should be, or whatever your belief is outside of the Bible. But
manipulating words is how you manipulate people.
Yep, and thoughts. Yep. I'm in a communication class right now, and that's exactly what we're talking about. Like, how you use your words, it influences how people think about you and how people think themselves, like about themselves, self-talk.
The term worldly in the world in general is a term that means that you're an experienced, typically kind of wise person who's been around a bit. And that's actually a good thing. But in Jehovah's Witness vernacular, worldly just means them.
Yes.
We're us and they're the evil them.
Yep. Yeah, the demonizing. Yeah, I remember demonizing people when I was younger too. I meant to say that earlier. It was a weird situation. People had broken into my sister's car, and they were trying to like explain their way out of it. But then we realized later, like, they were probably just on drugs, and they were looking for money or whatever. And when we realized that later, and we talked about it with our Jehovah's Witness friends, I literally wrote down in my diary, oh, they were probably demonized. So like, I literally demonized people. Like, I literally thought they were being driven by Satan's demons, which was, just for a little kid to write that down in their journal. That's like, whoa, weird. Let's see. So yeah, then at 18, I got my first corporate job, Starbucks. I had my first worldly boyfriend. I joined roller derby. I was just like, I didn't have any witness friends anymore, but I still lived at home. So it was kind of like this weird, like, double world thing going on. And then 19 is when everything changed. So I had a boyfriend at the time who I was sleeping with. And I went over to my uncle's house and got into an argument with him about my dad. I think he called my dad like a bad father or a bad elder or something that really shook me. So I didn't have too many friends at this point since I was just getting out, at least none who were like mature enough to understand. So I went to my mom's friend and confided in her about this argument that I'd gotten in with my uncle. And then somehow it came out that I was sleeping with my boyfriend. She got that out of me. And her husband was an elder and overheard in the other room. And he came in and made sure he heard what he heard. And I wasn't aware of like the 2-witness rule at the time. Which for people who don't understand, it's like when you have 2 people that can confirm something you have said or you have done, then you're caught. Like if one person does it, you can argue it, but if 2 people hear it, no, you're done for. So they called me a couple weeks later and said, like, we really hope you go to the elders about this. I just didn't respond. And then I started getting voicemails from elders saying, we need you to come in. And since I was living at home, my parents made me. I wouldn't have gone in if it was my choice, but my parents made me go and talk to them. So they asked me if these allegations were true. I denied them. I said, I didn't even say no. I said, that's my personal business. I'm not going to talk to you about my sex life. Like that's personal. I knew that was just a boundary that shouldn't be crossed by three older men, especially with the things that had happened to me up until that point. I was pretty good about like drawing these boundaries now. So they were like, well, should they come in and should we make sure like they heard what they heard? And of course I had told them, so I knew I was caught. So I just said, no, in fact, I want you to disassociate me right now. So I say I was disfellowship, but it was kind of both. Like they brought me in and then I flashed back, out of spite. I was like, no, disassociate me. But that car ride home, just driving back from that meeting, it was just like, I knew things were going to change, but like none of that mattered. I was just in this like blissful state where I was just like, oh my gosh, like it's done. All the lying and like hiding, it's finally done. Like I didn't even get a chance to think about the consequences or the negatives. I was just so happy that like this weight was lifted off of me. Like I'm not controlled by these people anymore. So shortly after that, I moved out because things got pretty weird at home. When my parents would have Jehovah's Witness friends over, they would like, and at least they did this. They would include me in the meal, food wise. They would let me have some of the food, but they would bring it to me in my room. So I felt, and I remember like writing like poetry, like I wanted to turn it to song about like feeling like either like a dog or like a sick hospital patient that had to be like quarantined. Like you need to be over here, like because you're sick or like because you're lower than the rest of us. And so things started getting very dark at home. It was just not healthy. So I moved out. I was so excited. I got my, not my own place, but I moved in with a couple of people in like the next city over, just people that I found on Craigslist. Much the dismay of my mother, because they were both men. And my mom was like, I just saw them as people, but my mom was like, oh my gosh, like you're a woman moving in with men. And it's like, I'm a person moving in with people. Mom, like, calm down. And I had like $7,000 in the bank at the time. And I just blew it all. Like when I first moved out, it was, I just went crazy. I said yes to everything. I partied hard. I did way too much ecstasy, like to the point where it really messed with my mental state. Like I think it sent me into another major depressive episode. So after 9 months out, I moved back in with my parents because I had blown through all my money. I had my mental state was really bad because I'd left all my friends. So everything was brand new to me. And I've heard you say in podcasts before, like everyone's just living their life. Like they're already living their life, but I was starting mine over. So I was like, it just wasn't matching up with people. I expected too much from people. I was like really clingy. So I wasn't able to make friends that easy.
Of course you were clingy. You just lost everybody that you knew, right? And so you're kind of desperate for somebody to care for you and be around you. And it is that self-fulfilling prophecy a lot of times where they don't give you any healthy mental and emotional tools or just real world tools to move out and exercise. So you go out, you feel lost in the world, you blow through your money, you party, you get involved in things because you don't know how. You've never been exposed to any of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And then so you go real hard it blows up in your face, and then they're always right there to take you back as long as you're willing to do what they want, right? Usually.
Oh, yeah. I remember my parents, they didn't like it, but it was kind of like, we told you, like they were happy to like welcome me back. And they had all these rules that I was supposed to follow, like what time I had to be home. And it was just torture because, and my dad like recognized that. He had to talk with me when he's like, this isn't going to be easy. Like you've gone out and you've done your thing and you've had your freedom, but we require rules when you're underneath our roof, like that whole thing. And it was just like, oh, it was so bad after I went back because I continued doing like psychedelics and things without them knowing. And I was around them a couple of the times that I was like on shrooms and they didn't know about it. So it was just, especially when you mess with psychedelics like that, it's like you have to be in a good mental state. And I still love things like that to this day, but you just have to be so careful. Like you have to be in the right state of mind to do those things. You cannot do them when you're just going through what I was going through. So there was, so I moved back and forth. I think I moved back 2 or 3 times because I would find a place, I would rent a room, and then it was either like a bad situation or my finances wouldn't be good enough or something would happen. And I was doubting myself a lot too. This was a point where I was like so low that I was like, well, maybe they were right. Maybe Jehovah is real. And I was just having all these doubts. I was like, maybe I should just go back and pretend. So I knew I wasn't going to go like back to the religion, but I at least wanted to pretend for my parents. I was like, okay, I'll pretend all of this. But as soon as they started mentioning like studying with someone, I'm like, no. Like, can't I just be good enough for you guys? Why do we have to involve the organization? Can't I just admit to you guys and then you guys accept me back? But they're like, that's not how this works. And it's like, of course not, because you're involved in a cult. I should have known. But I just wasn't willing to accept that at the time. I wasn't getting it. So let's see. What was I going to say? So I think it was around 21, I finally started dating someone. It's been like my longest relationship. So I finally got more stable. I finally moved out with some friends of mine who were very healthy. They had kids, so they like included me in their group. So I got more on my feet and I realized that like, I don't want to go back. Like they were spiritual, but not religious. And they kind of convinced me like, you can decide however you want to feel about God, but like, just from what you've told us, like this is a very unhealthy organization, like be careful. And so after I heard that from the outside, it was like, okay, they're right. Like this is a cult. I need to be very careful how I do this. I can't just ask my parents to take me back. So yeah, ever since then, let's see, 2021 that was, and then 22. So I'm 27 now. I moved into this place 5 years ago. So I was 22. When my parents sat me down and they were like, we want to give you a place to live because you're having trouble, clearly. I lived in like a city called Santa Ana that's known, parts of it are known for its gang activity, not all of it. There are some nice places. And so when they saw where I was living, it was a nice street that I was living on, but it's like 2 streets over was like, don't walk around at night. So they were very concerned for my safety, obviously. And so they sat me down and were like, we have this, like our first place was a mobile home. So we're going to give you this mobile home and invest, like, you just need to help us, get it from San Diego up to paint it, redo it, all the inside, get the weeds from outside of the place. So it was a whole project. So it was kind of cool. Like we bonded over this place. And I saw like how much they cared about me. Like they were willing to financially invest in me enough to give me a place to live. So I've been very thankful since then. Like I don't think I realized it because at the time I was just so happy. I was like, oh my gosh, like it's cheap rent. I can do whatever the hell I want here. I had someone move in with me who was a huge partier. So we just partied all the time. And then around that time, I started realizing just about my sexual orientation. She was someone who I fell in love with. And then we had a falling out. I kind of like kicked her out, and she moved in with someone and got married to her. And then just these last few years have been just me like coming to peace with like, I'm not going to go back to that organization. It's toxic. And I, and just realizing like who I am, like that I'm not a woman, that everything that I was forced to endure as a child, like was just something that happened to me. It's not who I am. It doesn't define me. Yeah. So
can I ask, being non-binary, looking back at your life as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, I'm just wondering if you can speak to anyone else that might feel similarly, you know, that might have had similar experiences and find their identity, you know, isn't exactly what they thought either, not just from the being an ex-Jehovah's Witness standpoint, you know, but also, you know, their own gender identities. What would you say to somebody else, or how do you feel like it impacted you kind of trying to be forced? Being in a cult is trying to be forced into a mold, right? That doesn't fit you. And that obviously probably happened in other ways as well. Are there any ways that you saw that it really impacted you, that you could speak to, that might make somebody else out there maybe feel not so alone, that's kind of gone through similar things?
Yeah, definitely. So the thing that changed things for me was educating myself. I finally went to a community college and took American government to realize like how society is set up, because the way I discovered my identity was realizing the layers that society puts on you. So there was a layer that my family put on me. There was a layer that Jehovah's Witnesses put on me. There was another layer that just society in general puts on you through like the government, your sex marker on your driver's license, the way you fill out paperwork. That's a whole other layer. But there's this layer underneath that is always you. And even though I've only recently discovered in the last year how I feel about my gender, because gender and sexuality are, they're so wrapped up in each other that it's so hard to find which one's which. Because for the longest time, I just thought I was a lesbian. I was like, I'm attracted to the same gender as me, but it like didn't feel right. So I would just say like to listen to yourself. When things don't feel right, explore it. And it's always good to educate yourself for like verbiage that people use so that you can respect other people and describe yourself and find words and labels that fit you. But to not get too caught up in that. Like remember that just think about how you feel. Like if you didn't have to deal with society at all, how would you feel about your body? Where would you reside? And it sounds weird, but I literally reside in different parts of my body now. Like I used to reside a lot in my chest. I was very proud to be like this voluptuous woman because that's what people told me I looked like. And that's what people told me that they liked about me. But just because people tell you that they like things about you and you look a certain way doesn't mean that's who you are and that's what you have to like about yourself. For me, it was like I had to realize that I had a lot of chest dysphoria. I didn't like this thing about me, and I want to change it. And just you're going to feel like you're fighting multiple layers, because I'm constantly fighting the layer that my parents put on me because it's always in the back of my mind because it's how I was raised. So you're always going to be fighting that. That's probably the hardest one that you're going to fight. And then I'm fighting people at work, like trying to, people adjusted really well to my name change. There was a few people that were like, well, who knows, like this is just a nickname, or they won't take it seriously because our society is you just have a name that you're born with and that's just your name for the rest of your life. Like, why on earth would you want to change it? Why would you rock the boat like that? But this is something that that psychedelics and drugs did for me. And I'm not saying everyone should go down that path, but there's different ways of finding this about yourself. But this is how I found out, was just having my mind alter so much that I was able to come away from myself, take my ego out of it, and just realize that we're more powerful than we think. And everything that people are placing on you, it's not easy. It's not easy, but you can fight that. You can go against it if it's how you feel. Not everyone should. Some people are born cisgender and their body aligns with their assigned sex. So that's fine. But for people who it doesn't match, like, it's almost like you have that power inside of you to fight these things that are placed on you. And it's not easy. I've had to educate my manager. My manager had to like call up his boss and like, how do I deal with this person? Like, they're asking to use these pronouns that no one really realizes are a singular pronoun compared to a plural pronoun. How do I deal with them? So there's like these legal implications that people weren't aware of. Like, yes, you have to respect that. And at least in this country, thankfully, there are other countries where I would probably be killed for coming out as who I really am. So I'm thankful that I live here, especially in this state too. California is very good with transgender laws. But yeah, just it's not easy, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Just like getting out of Jehovah's Witnesses wasn't easy, but it doesn't mean that you can't do it or you shouldn't do it. Because living your life for other people, you're going to be miserable. I don't care how many Jehovah's Witnesses tell you they're happy and they have families. They have not, many of them haven't searched deep down for who they really are. They haven't had those moments of reconciling with themselves to the point where you have to say yes or no to some questions. Is this how I feel? And if you get the answer no, does it align? No, then, and you realize that you are trans. It's a long journey, but it's beautiful. It's made me realize that I'm so much stronger than I ever thought I could be. It's shown people for who they really are. I've had some friends that I thought were my true friends that didn't respect who I am. And even just sexual partners. If people, like I remember having to tell my parents that there are people who don't want to have sex and they are called asexual. And my parents just didn't believe me. They were like, this isn't a thing. And I just realized that it takes a lot of educating. And it's something that I'm so proud that my generation is doing. We're educating ourselves. Sure, we're putting a lot of labels on things and it's complicated and messy and people don't know like what to call themselves. And it's different than what other people call themselves. And it gets very messy, but the way I see it, life works like a spiral. And this is exactly the same thing that happened with like gay rights. Like there was these people that thought it was perverted, and there was all these laws against it. And the same thing is happening with trans stuff right now. It's like people don't really understand it. They think it's perverted. There's laws against it, but now those laws are changing. It's like, it's just, we're on that same marker, but we're like getting better. We're going up the spiral. We're ascending to just better understanding of ourselves as society. So especially people who have the layer of being ex-Jehovah's Witness or currently Jehovah's Witness, and trans, you have to really like spend a lot of time alone with yourself. I kind of imagine it like you're on like an island of your own. And this pandemic is perfect for that, because you have the excuse to be on your own, to look inside yourself and ask yourself the really hard questions. Do I like wearing this? Do I like it when people touch this part of me? Do I even like doing this act? Do I like all these different things? And being really honest with yourself. And I think that's beautiful. I don't think a lot of people do that. When I tell people I changed my name, they're like, you can do that? Like, they're like, why? And it's like, why not? Why not have fun with this life? It's so freaking short. Like, why would you not want to do exactly what it is, what you want to do, as long as it's healthy for you and people around you, obviously.
Right.
Like, if only constraints that it's not hurting anyone and you're not hurting yourself, why not do it? And many people will be like, well, I'm too scared, or it's rocking the boat, or it seems unnecessary. It's like, life's unnecessary. Like, there are so many unnecessary things that we do in life. Why would this be the one that you refute as, oh, it's too much, when it affects your mental health as much as it does? There are way too many ex-Jehovah's Witnesses that commit suicide and harm themselves, and there are way too many trans people that do too. I can't count the number of times I have like burn marks all on my arms, because when things have gone bad with my parents and I didn't realize how to process them, I just look for pain. I just look for that chemical in your brain that causes pain, that gets you to focus. But there are other ways, there are more healthy ways to do that.
Again, you wanted to feel something.
Yeah.
A theme of your of part of that life. I appreciate you sharing all that, because human life is so broad, and our experiences are so different. It's I'm glad that we're in the information age, where you can have these discussions, learn about these things, learn about how everyone expresses themselves in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember if I've said this on a previous podcast or not, but and I'm not saying that it equates necessarily to gender differences, but body issues are rampant within the JW and ex-JW community, period, because we came from such an appearance-oriented organization. And as I talked about earlier, you have parents trying to control their kids over their hair and stuff like that. But everything from weight to daring as a young woman to have breasts to, men have those issues as well. There's this you have to be like the masculine man or the typical, whatever it is. There's like all these. I even remember, and I don't know if you remember this or not. What'd you say?
Sorry, no tight pants.
No, definitely no tight pants or flashy socks, because that's crazy making. But go out and buy all the Macallan whiskey you want. We'll load up the carts. Don't do it with crazy socks. But people have been shamed so much. Shame is the tool inside the organization, and people are shamed for the way they look and the way they present themselves. I remember there was an article. I had to go back and look for it. It's just been one of those things that hits me in the head every once in a while, and it was I don't know if it was a Kingdom Ministry or if it was probably a Watchtower Study article, but it was about like the masculine and the feminine. And it was like so old school, and like, brothers, you have to act this way, and sisters must act this way. And the dumb, awful, misogynistic jokes that even as a kid I could see were being made from the platform about the sisters cooking and the brothers, can't be clean. And I was just like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing as a kid. The whole cult is always trying to force you into roles. As you said, society as a whole tries to force us into roles, and likes tightly defined categories for us all. And I love what you said about having the layers on you. One of the things I often do people when I coach people or work with them is a lot of people have heard this before, but getting a picture of yourself as a child, a small child, that little free you before all the expectations were placed on you, all the labels were placed on you, all the horrible things people have said or the experiences that you've had. Like there was like this purest form of you, and just trying to get back to whoever that is, and just being yourself. Like you said, life's short, be yourself, and be happy. It kind of made me think when you're talking, I always end these episodes with, love others, do no harm, and go be happy. And it's kind of struck me, maybe it should be love yourself, do no harm, and go be happy. Because that's something none of us were ever allowed to do. We were
Yep.
never allowed to truly love ourselves for who we are, ever in that.
Yep.
So you have been out now for how long then? So you're 27. You talked about like 23-ish when you got this place, maybe?
Yeah. So out of like on my own.
Yeah, on your own then for like 4 years?
Yeah, officially, yeah, out of my parents. Five I've been in this place, but then a couple years before that, on and off.
Has anything happened since then that you'd like to share?
I mean, just in the last year, just finding people in the queer community that I can really relate to, has been good. Just going, like we mentioned before, we started talking, recording, was I go once a week to LGBT meetings. And it just kind of works out that we're all trans. So that's been really nice. Also, getting a support system, basically. So having them regularly, having my therapist to talk to regularly, and having like a really great roommate who is also trans. It turns out we kind of like found ourselves around the same time, and it's funny how life works out. Like we moved in with each other, thinking we were opposite genders, thinking we were both cisgender. But like, I don't know, it's kind of like life knew that we were going to be able to relate to each other later on. And so she's been here like 4 years. It's just kind of like worked out. And it's funny. I forgot to mention earlier that, I tried to get back in I think this is pretty important. I tried to get back in, 2 years ago. I was at like a really dark place. That's when I was burning myself, and I was just desperate. I just wanted my parents back so bad. I just didn't know what to do. I was beside myself. I was either going to kill myself or get back in. So I tried to get reinstated. I went to meetings for 6 months, and it was terrible. Just putting on a dress and I only went Sundays because of my work schedule. I was working 2 jobs at the time and going to school. So it was definitely, it sounds weird. It was mentally degrading, but it was also kind of healing, because I was because I had left so young that officially, or like mentally rather, stopped listening to the doctrine, that it was interesting to go back and hear the doctrine and hear the way they say things as an adult on my own without anyone filtering it for me. It was kind of healing in that way.
Because you could see how awful it truly was.
Yeah, I could finally see just the little things, like you said, like how people would react. Like something that really shook me was because I'd heard about the whole blood transfusion thing. And I'd heard people on YouTube talking about how horrible it is. And I knew in the back of my mind that it was awful, but I hadn't really felt it up close. So I went to a convention because I wanted to make it like very apparent that I was trying really hard. I went to a convention on my own, wore a dress, definitely got a drink during an admission though. I went to like a nearby bar because I was just like, oh my God. And I think I hope people saw me and thought that I was a Jehovah's Witness, because that was also like a plan of mine at one point. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to tell people that I'm a Jehovah's Witness and like do a bunch of terrible things. And then they'll think just be the worst witness ever. Just do the opposite, like anti-witness basically. But I mean, that's just so much commitment and effort that I'm like, that's not worth my time. But I was at this convention. It was during the baptism talk, which I feel made it very inappropriate, what the guy ended up talking about. But he was mentioning that, I think he was talking about dedication and what it means. And he mentioned that his teenage son, had to get a blood transfusion, and he started getting all choked up. And of course they had to refuse it. And he was saying how it's traumatic because the doctors were threatening to bring the law, into it, that they were abusing their son, which is fucking true. And he started getting choked up to the point where like he couldn't talk at one point. He paused and everyone just started clapping. And I just sat there and I just felt like this like creepy energy go. I'm not like a huge energy person, but I felt something. It like came over my body. I got goosebumps. And because I just like looked around and everyone was clapping and they were just like, oh, like shaking their heads like, oh, isn't that great? And I was just like, you are literally talking about sacrificing your teenage son who like cannot give his own consent to whether he wants this or not. Because I think he was in a coma at the time or something too. So like there was layers to that. And you're praising this man for basically abusing his teenage child. Just after that, I was just like, oh, it just really scared me, the power that this organization has over people's personal decisions that can literally end in their lives. And since I told my therapist that, she's like, okay, you need to get life insurance. I will send you a plan that includes who you give power of attorney to, or like the power if you're ever out, because this really concerned her. She was like, so if something happened to me and my next of kin were my parents, that's concerning. Like they could have the power to refuse blood transfusion based on their views and not mine. And I've told my parents that since in a fit of rage. And my dad was like, yeah, go right ahead, because we would. I'm like, oh my gosh, like,
oh my goodness, that's horrible to hear. My God. Yeah. So you're talking about getting a living will, basically, that goes into what you would want in your life. It's kind of like the durable power of attorney that they would have us do as Jehovah's Witnesses, only
reverse.
Only healthier. Yeah. They're not pushing you to murder yourself.
Yeah. Gosh, that oh yeah, so to finish that experience out, so I tried to go back. I got to the point where I had finished up the amount of time. I sent them a letter because that was the next step. They got a judicial committee again together for me, except it was a different congregation, because I was like, I'm done with that one. I want to start, because I had heard experiences of people that had gone back and they said it's better, like specifically for family, people that were like faking it to get in, which is exactly what I was doing, to go to a different congregation. So that's what I did. Little did I know that I should have assumed this, that they had talked to my previous elders, which I should have known that, but I didn't know to what extent they knew about my life. I didn't know they knew that I was living with someone. And so they asked me at the end, I told them like, I've stopped smoking. I've stopped all the immoral things that I was a part of. And they were like, okay, is there anything else? They kind of like backed me into this corner. And I was like, no, like, what do you mean? They're like, well, they just kind of like looked at each other like, oh, we have them now. It was so creepy. They were like, well, we've heard from your past congregation that you live with a non-believer who they understood to be a man. She's a trans woman. She's not a man. But I was like, okay. I just felt very like caught off guard. Like they had like backed me into a corner. And I was like, yes, like we have different rooms. We are not in a relationship. And I don't see how they have anything to do with this. And I even told them, I was like, I can show you pictures of our house. Like we live in separate quarters. They are, and I refer to them as like my tenant. I tried to like separate her from me even more. I was like my tenant, even though she's like a sister to me. I was trying to be like very separating language. And they did the whole thing where they have you go out of the room and they have you come back in. And they, took out an article from a watchtower that they had pre-printed out. So they were like ready for this. That said, I love this. The first few words were, we would never tell anyone who to live with. And then it went into like how it looks to other people, how it would look. So basically they let me get reinstated because they wanted me to kick my roommate out and to have a nice Jehovah's Witness sister move in. And they asked me like, how much is the rent? Okay, well we have people, that would be a great thing for this sister. Oh yeah, that would be great. like, it was so creepy. And I felt it right then. I was like, so you want to send in like a spy, basically, to like keep an eye on me and to influence me and kick this other person who really needs a home out onto the street for them to do, like, it was just so separating. Like, well, you have a them in your house, which is ironic because that's my pronoun. They were like, it's just very like the us versus them thing again. And I just told them no. I was like, I'm sorry, it clearly says right here you can't tell me who to live with, so I'm going to have to say no. And so they said no, you can't get reinstated. And it was just like, so you won't tell me who to live with, but you're telling me who to live with. Like, just the reasoning was just so otherworldly that I was just like, hey, you know what? Never mind. He's out.
And Z, they weren't going to let you back in anyway.
No.
You weren't attending all the like, they want you to attend all of the meetings, not just the Sunday meeting. And they want you to, and how sickening to know that there's no way, especially after 6 months, usually they reject your first application of sorts anyway. They're not typically going to let you in. So the fact that they were willing to sacrifice the person living with you, sacrifice her, throw her out on the street. Who cares about her? Send a spy in to live with you. All that over nothing because they weren't going to let you in anyway. It's a sick game that they play with people's lives.
Well, and
really gross.
It was equally gross to hear what my mom had to say about it. I told my mom later because I thought for some stupid reason that she was going to be on my side. And she was like, see, they knew. Jehovah knew.
Yep. And
it was just like, oh, wow. Okay. Like, just ever since then, I'm just like, okay, never going back. Like, this is, I tried. And that little voice in the back of my head is gone. Like, it shut up after that. Like that, like, maybe you can try. No, we're not going to try again. This is it. Deal with it.
So at this point, where are you in regard to shunning? I mean, I would guess that most all Jehovah's Witnesses shun you in general, but what about your family? Do you have any contact there anymore?
So it's changed a little bit. So originally, like when I first moved out and those times back and forth, it was very kind of cut and dry. Like, my dad put it really weird once. I asked him to go grocery or garage sailing when I lived at home. He's like, we can't play with you anymore. Like as if we're all kids on the playground. It's like, you're my parents. This is not the way to talk to your child. You can't play with me anymore. Like, if that's what you need to tell yourself, okay. But like, don't say that to me because what? I just thought that was so weird that he'd say that. So it was kind of cut and dry was my point. But now I've, and I asked my dad, like, what's changed? Because now, like, if I call them, because I was really concerned for a while. I saw some of their propaganda, that one video that was specifically talking about how to treat dysocial people. And they didn't say it, but they showed a video of the woman doing dishes and her daughter calls and she just looks down at the phone. And the narrator's talking about something about how, like, things can be hard. We would never want to do anything that would stumble us. So they never say, like, don't pick up your phone when your child calls. But that's what they showed. She called and then she looked down and she didn't pick it up. And she was so
manipulation.
Yeah. And I guess, so I talked to my mom about this later and she said, yeah, after I saw that, I went and talked to an elder and asked him, what did that mean? Can I not pick up my child's calls? And I don't really know what her answer was, but obviously it was no, that's fine because if I call them, they pick up. And same with my sister. So I white lied to interview them for this because I was confused about like the timeline of like when my sister got disfellowship and I wanted to be prepared for this interview. So I told them I had like a school project and I was like, I just need to know. And I threw in like some extra questions about our childhood. And I was like, I just need to know some details about like our lives.
You get an A in the class.
Yeah. You guys are my class. Here's my presentation. So if I pick up, they'll call. But things have gotten a little rockier since I came out to them because since my parents knew, since I accidentally let it slip. I also told my sister and her husband is from Wales, so he's much more rigid on things. So I think he's influencing her a little bit. But I have a niece and nephew, by the way, that are like 5 and 7, I think. So she was letting me see for a little while. She was letting me see my niece and nephew. I would go over because I wanted to like work something out that was beneficial for both of us. So her big addiction is exercise. Ever since we were younger, exercise, that is like her life. She's part of like one of those like culty. The second cult in her life is one of those gyms, CrossFit. She's one
CrossFit, yeah.
Family. Which has been like a big thing that my mom's against because it's like you're hanging out with people too much outside, but I think it's good for her. So I knew that was a strength of my sister. So I was like, let's trade you like train me for a half hour and then I watch the kids either for school, like help them to school, or if you want to go out and take some time for you, because this was like when the pandemic started. And I was like, clearly like you're going to need some, or I think it was a few months ago in the middle of it. And I was like, you're going to need some time away from them, because my mom was telling me how frustrated my sister was after they moved into a new house and then they were alone with the kids all the time. So it worked out. So for like a month or month and a half, like every week I would go over and we would have like a session. And then she actually started like at first my brother-in-law was there because so his brother was disfellowshipped in Wales. Long story short, he ended up being a pedophile, killing himself in the prison over there in Wales. He was like all over the Welsh news. So my brother-in-law kind of feels weird about people obviously watching his kids. So I totally understood that. Like it was never said, but he was kind of like always there
that makes sense. I mean, that would definitely make
like
nervous.
Yeah. And of course, like my perceived gender, though, it's like they've let me watch the kids now. I'm sure if were I born a male, that would not be the case. But so it was good until I told them my real name and that I wanted to be called Z instead of my birth name. And at first it was fine. The first like couple times I saw my sister, she was actually doing really good. Like I told her about my pronouns, but like how I don't expect her to use them because it's so far out of the world. Like it's hard for the world and it's so much harder in their bubble. So I explained to her, like, it's not that big a deal. I just want to let you know, this is what other people call me. This is who I am. But it was kind of like a hurried conversation because the kids were there distracting us. And then her husband came home. So so that's where we're at right now. Like I still want to tell her about myself, but she wrote me like a month ago and said like, we're gonna have to take a step back. Like I don't know how to call you. I was proud of her. She actually had a conversation with the kids, and the next time I came over after I came out to her, my nephew was like, what's up? Like my dead name. And then my little niece was like, it's Auntie Z now, remember? And so like clearly like she had a conversation and it made me so happy. I was like, oh, like progress was being made. But I think the best, like something must have come up, like either with my brother-in-law or just with her own subconscious that
sometimes it's just a meeting part that they came across, or they just had the conventions and there was something said in a convention, and
mm-hmm.
Anything like that can suddenly change and cause a direction.
I think that's the problem for her, is because I don't know about any literature that's about being transgender besides maybe something super creepy from the 80s. Probably that's
But basically anything outside of
that's true.
Heterosexual male female is out. I mean, they're not accepting typically of anything outside of the very binary way that they see the world, period, in every aspect of life, right? I mean, it's just who they are.
So,
well, I'm sorry that hasn't. It sounds like there's at least hope that there's maybe some relationship there that kind of like a lot of things comes and goes, right?
I think time will tell. I'm just trying to get out of this area right now, and I live so close to them that I'm just like, like time is of the essence. Like, I want to give you space, but there's going to be a time when I can't physically come and see the kids. So like space, but also can you hurry up?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's difficult because you can't control them, and they definitely have their own ways of being. Well, so let's talk about you. So you want to get out of the area. So what do you like about your life since leaving, and is there anything that you want going forward? You know, is there something, you know, what do you want for your life as Z going into the future?
Mm-hmm. So I want to spend the next few years still, because I just found out about my gender expression. I want to give that more time for me to fully develop into who I am and express myself. So yeah, self-expression. I want to move to a different country eventually. That's like, I've been writing that in my diary since I was 13 years old. And I've always told myself, if I die without doing that, it'll be a huge disappointment. I want to live, maybe not the Jason Bourne lifestyle. I want something more stable, but at least for a year, I want to live somewhere, preferably either in like a less developed country, so I can see, like, I feel like I just need a refresher. I went from a small town to living here for way longer than I wanted to, and getting so comfortable that I really want to get out of my comfort zone, like live somewhere where you have to try really hard to, to find, like, make your own meals, like from scratch, and just learn about different ways of living, different traditions, different spiritualities. So I really like to visit Thailand. They have a big trans scene there, actually, because they accept their gender is part of their tradition as well, part of their like indigenous people's culture. So so that's something that I would like to explore, because it's, not only is it accepting, but it's cheaper. Even if I just visited, maybe even somewhere, I'd like to visit like another U.S. territory, because it's a little easier, obviously, if I were to like move there. So somewhere like that, but definitely get out of America, like anywhere outside of this way of living, even just for a short time. That would be awesome if I could achieve that. I want to always keep educating myself. I realize that, like, education doesn't stop. I want to be that 50-year-old in your community college that's like still taking classes just for the heck of it. I knew someone like that, and he was great. We went to like a Renaissance fair together. He's just, you could tell like these people were held back for a while, and like now they're finding themselves. But I want to be that person that's like, I've been doing this for a long time. Like, I just want to keep learning. Just random, like he was like leather working, just like some random skill. And then let's see, I definitely would like to meet someone who validates me now that I know who I am. The whole like fall in love, find someone who I can go on these journeys with. Which has been hard, like during this pandemic. Dating is really difficult. Like I'm going on a second date with someone who lives an hour away. Like she's very far, but for me it's worth it, because I'd rather date someone who understands me and who is the gender that I prefer, instead of just someone. It'd be very easy to date a cis male around here for me, but not interested in that at all. And then just keep a good relationship with my niece and nephew. I want to be that person in their life that I didn't have in my life. Like, I had a gay aunt. My dad's sister was not a Jehovah's Witness, and she was gay, and she just died very lonely, because I think of how my dad's family treated her, but also just because of the way society treated her. So I want to just get that good support system, the person that I love, create like a chosen family, and then eventually either like foster a kid or adopt and create like a family of my own. But definitely that's like a long-term goal. I want to keep doing the self-exploration for like at least another like 10 years, and then settle down and have some.
That's beautiful. And how good that you know that about yourself, that you want to spend time getting to know yourself before you are really looking for that long-term relationship or whatever, because you have to know yourself in any relationship. It's not just about knowing the other person. You got to know yourself. And, many people don't have that when they go into those relationships.
Yeah. Even my communications class is just helping me. Like, we recently did an exercise where she gave you a situation, and then you have to identify the behavior, describe 2 possible reasons why you think the person did that to the person, and then ask for clarification. And I've just started doing that even with my roommate. Like, okay, you put the towel here. I don't like the towel there. I think it needs to go there. Why do you put the towel there? And then, like, we worked it out. She puts it there because she wants a hand towel, and I'm messier than she is. So I just don't even think about that. I just use a towel for everything, which isn't the most sanitary. But, like, I'm just my brain just doesn't work like that. I don't think like, oh, we should probably have a hand towel. But thankfully I live with someone who's like, we need this separate, like, cleanliness. So that's been nice for me to realize, like, how to communicate with someone you live with. It'll help me later when I get into a relationship with someone, instead of just bottling it up and us passive aggressively, like, moving the towel back and forth. It helped me a lot in that way.
What's the fun in that? I mean, come on.
I'm scared of confrontation, I've learned. People are scared.
Of course they are.
Walk up to the person and be like, why are you doing this? I don't like it. Because then that opens up, like, pushback and things being said about you that you don't like. Like, I've learned to be humble enough to realize that, yeah, sometimes, like, I do things that people don't like and it annoys them. And guess what? That's life. Like, that's okay. How can I like work better at work and at home so that I'm enjoyable to be around, instead of, unenjoyable to be around. Like,
sure. Well, that's awesome. Well, I appreciate you sharing all of this with us. I mean, from your life to the lessons that you've learned, to what you want in the future. Yeah, that's we're all ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, or a lot of us are ex-something who are listening. I have people who listen who've never been any of these religions, but just, they're fascinated. They're interested in the stories. They love people. They want to learn about the world around them, which involves us as well. Or, a lot of people have grown up in households where there was narcissism and things present, and they identify with a lot of what we've gone through. And so, all of our stories matter, and it helps, create this beautiful tapestry of lives that have been lived and lives that will go on and be lived. And I'm really glad that you got to share yours as part of this. So I appreciate that.
Your curse God.